We'll be talking about cross-platforming. And once the session is over, we want to take this education and put it to use. So we don't want everyone sitting down for the whole session. We're actually going to get up and go out and start using the knowledge that Bill is going to give us today. So I know a few folks are going to be trickling in, but it's already 9:15, so I think we're going to start. And ladies and gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for Bill?
Thanks a lot, Mike. Good morning, everyone. So I hope everyone had a good time last night. I was looking at the schedule, and I saw there was some fun scheduled for last night, and that probably means a little harder getting up this morning. So a little bit about me. I have been taking photos since I was 17. I started off with a regular SLR camera, single lens reflex, with film, shooting black and white. Spent a lot of time perfecting that. You know, when you shoot in black and white, you really focus on the composition and how to capture those shots. I'm mainly focused in landscape, abstract, architectural photography. I did run a design studio, an interactive design studio for 18 years before I went over to Apple. And with that, I spent a lot of time building websites and kiosks and doing a lot of 360 photography work. That's something I've been doing for a good 20 years or so. And I've shot a lot of 360 tours. And in fact, I shot the BMR for Google. And a lot of the hotels and restaurants and such where you get a 360 tour with Google and some of their own websites, I probably went in and shot that. So that's sort of my background. I've been using smartphones since they first came out. So the iPhone's been out 15 years now, so I've been using that for all that time. I know some of you probably have some Android phones or maybe some other devices, so I'm going to try to generalize some of this as far as how you might capture your shots, but then also I am going to go over through some of the settings with the iPhone. So I guess the first thing I should do is kind of get an idea who I'm talking to here. So if you're an Android user, give me a little wave. Okay. And iPhone users? All right, so it's about a 50-50 mix. So what I show you, I'm going to have to show you on the iPhone because I can really only have one phone hooked up to the screen, and that's the one, of course, I know best. But I will be generalizing things, and then, like Mike said, afterwards, we'd like to go out and maybe capture some shots. That way, if you have any questions for me, or I can give you some tips as far as managing the sunlight, managing different lenses that you might use on your device, things of that nature, that's what we're going to do. So, of course, I'm going to be holding the iPhone quite a bit. So let's just see how well I can project. If I can project well with my voice, I think I'll put the microphone down, but let's give it a little shot here. Give me a moment. All right, here we go. Don't see an off, just lay it down. All right, can everyone hear me all right? Okay, I'm pretty good at projecting because I'm used to talking to a whole lot of people. In addition to, working in the Apple Store, I've given conferences and other things, not only for photography, but for coding and design and all that good stuff. But today, we're going to talk about how to take better stage photos with your smartphone. And the things we're going to cover today are your camera basics, different things you want to focus on, of course. Oh, that's even better. Bear with me. Let me put that down.
Got it?
Perfect. All right, how's that? I'm not screaming at you, but a little better, right? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so when it comes to capturing your photographs, and I'm just going to zoom right back over to here for a moment. You know, it's really a lot about composition. That's really what you're paying attention to, and you're paying attention to the lighting around you. Is it behind you? Is it in front of you? Is it to the side of you? So on and so forth. And when you're thinking about composition, that really starts moving into, well, what lens should I use? So give me a little wave if you have more than just one lens option on your device. Okay, some of you maybe only still have one lens. Some of you will do something called a digital zoom, and we'll talk a little bit about a regular manual zoom or a standard lens zoom versus a digital zoom, pluses and minuses of those things. But let's go into the settings on my iPhone. All of you on Android, I welcome you to go ahead and open up the settings for your camera. And I'm sure that there's going to be some similar things. Now, when it comes to Android or Apple, or even another device of some kind, there's benefits and features for both. And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what you feel most comfortable with, what you feel gives you the best photograph. Nowadays, they are so comparable. They are so similar. If you look at some of these articles that come out comparing the different smartphone photography options or the actual photos at the end of the day, I mean, it just flips back and forth. Oh, the iPhone's better this year, or the Android phone's better this year. The bottom line is, all modern smartphones really take amazing photos. So it's just really up to you which features you like and what sort of things you want to do. But as far as shooting photos, you know, it really doesn't matter which camera you have. I'm going to go ahead and open up the settings on the iPhone. And like I said, follow along on your Android phone. You're going to have some similar settings for sure. So I'm sure everybody knows the Settings app is a silver gear on an iPhone. I think there's a similar like kind of silver gear or gear on an Android device, and you tap on that, you're going to get to your settings. So once I get into the settings on an iPhone, I'm going to go ahead and slide on down here to camera. And on the iPhone, it's all sectioned here with the music and the TV and the books and so on and so forth. And when I open up the camera, I'm not going to go over every single thing, but there's a few different things I want to bring to your attention. So on the iPhone, at the very top, we have formats. You can have high efficiency or most compatible. I always go with most compatible because it's just easiest to share. It's a little bit of a larger file, but if you want to go with the high efficiency, that's going to shrink it down a little bit. That's not a big deal. RAW, ProRAW, that's something I'm not going to get too into, but when we get out here, you want to ask me a little bit about RAW photos or ProRAW video, we can discuss that. I'm going to back out of that using the top left corner arrow, and I'm going to go down to grid. So the grid is something I highly recommend you turn on. If you have it off at the moment, go ahead and turn that on. And we're going to talk about how that is very useful. And then moving on down, lens correction is great for sort of correcting the really bowed out and curved lines that you're going to get when you shoot with a wide angle or ultra wide. And then something called HDR. On an iPhone, it's called Smart HDR. That basically, the easiest way to explain that is thinking about how I used to shoot HDR with my SLR or my DSLR cameras rather. Instead of think about your eye. Your eye, when you're in a dimly lit room, you can kind of slowly start to see all the different things in the room. But as soon as you walk outside on a bright sunny day, it takes a little while for your eyes to adjust, right? You're kind of squinting for a little while and then, okay, now I can see a little better. Or the reverse of that. You're somewhere outside, it's very bright, and now you're moving into a very dark room. And again, it takes a little while for your eyes to adjust and get used to that sort of lighting. And basically what that's telling you is your eye has a certain range of brightness that it can see at any one time. So when you're outside, it's kind of adjusted for that. And then when you go inside, it kind of readjusts to something else. You don't get that whole range the entire time. It's the same thing with our cameras. When we're shooting, our cameras have a certain range of brightness that it can capture. And if you want to get the broadest range, what you can do with an SLR or DSLR rather is capture it with a setting that's great for the outside, great for the inside, and then somewhere in the middle. And then you can layer those photographs in a photo editing application. And now you have like a giant range. And that really gives you the best option. Not something you really need to worry about with today's smartphones because there's just a switch and you click it. And in milliseconds, your phone is figuring all that stuff up. It's combining the images. On the iPhone, it's taking more than just 3 images. It's taking 10, 12, 13 images. And artificial intelligence in the device is looking at all those images and it's going, okay, this one's sharp, this one's sharp, this one's great. Okay, now let's combine it all together, boom. So I just recommend you have HDR turned on. If you see that on your Android device, turn it on. All right, I'm gonna back out of that. And on the iPhone, I just swipe up from the bottom. If you don't have a button, if you have a button, press that button. It's gonna get you back out to the main screen. So let's just talk real quickly about the quickest way to get to your camera. Sometimes that great photo is right there. Maybe the perfect lighting on the stage during a performer, and you want to hurry and get it, and you weren't ready, or you were texting the sound guys, you were texting somebody else, and now you got to hurry over and switch back to your camera. So I'm going to just give you a few quick ways to get to your camera quickly on an iPhone. So iPhone's in my pocket or it's off, what have you. As soon as you lift it up, it should come on. You're on a lock screen. If you have an iPhone without a button, you're going to see right here an icon for the camera. If you press down on that, you're immediately in the camera. You don't have to put in your passcode or put in your Face ID or any of that stuff to get to the camera on an iPhone. You won't be able to get past that if you don't put in any of those security credentials. But you're quickly in the camera, you're ready to shoot. That's one way. Another way is on that same screen, you can just swipe to the left, don't have to press the button, same thing, you're immediately in the camera. Of course, while you're looking at your phone, you can also use Siri. The best way to use Siri, in my opinion, is just hold down the side button like a walkie-talkie, let go when you're done talking, open camera, and boom, you can get to the camera that way. One last thing you can do for any app on an iPhone, whether you're shooting or maybe you're editing or you're doing something different, just put your finger in the middle, swipe down the height of an icon, and that's going to reveal the search bar, and you can just start typing the name of the app that you're looking for, and boom, there you go. All right, so quick ways to get to the camera. Once we are in the camera, let's talk a little bit about the composition. So this is portrait mode meaning we're up and down. Now, when I say portrait mode for you iPhone users, there is a setting called portrait mode, and that's not what I'm talking about now. I'm simply talking about having your phone up and down, and then there's landscape. So turning it this way, and we have a wide shot. Now, in my opinion, landscape's really the best way to go First of all, you're going to be able to capture a lot more real estate left and right. But the other advantage, especially for the iPhone, is if I hold it with the volume buttons up, I can use the volume buttons to capture my shot. I don't need to tap that big white shutter button. And that is very, very helpful because you can get a firm grip on your device and you have those two volume buttons. It doesn't matter whether it's volume up or volume down. Snap, that's going to let you capture a nice steady shot because your hand's solid on it, and boom, we captured a photo just like that. Going on from there, let's talk a little bit about some of the settings. So first of all, there's basic photo to capture any kind of photo. There's the portrait mode, which is probably not going to be all that useful for shooting stages. Portrait mode on an iPhone is really for shooting people or something that's relatively close. Usually within 4 to 12 feet or so, you're going to get the best look. What portrait mode does on an iPhone is it basically creates a depth of field that gives a nice blurry background around whatever subject you're shooting. So if you're shooting a person, you're going to get this beautiful bokeh, is what a photographer would tell you. A nice bokeh, some people still call it bokeh as well. That's a beautiful blurred background, and the reason that is nice is because it helps pop the subject. So, you know, perhaps there's an opportunity to shoot an artist and you're pretty close to them, maybe you're on stage with them. That's where portrait mode might come in handy. Maybe it's just one of another crew member or somebody you want to capture, or maybe even a particular portion of the stage. Some of the lighting or some of the speakers or something like that. That might work well, but otherwise, I don't see you using a lot of portrait mode photography for shooting stages, but that's what that does. And then we have Pano. Pano is capturing a very wide shot. This one can be very tricky, especially if you're amongst a lot of people and a lot of movement and a lot of lighting. Essentially, with Pano mode on an iPhone, you're starting in one direction and you're slowly rotating around in another direction, and it's gonna stitch all those images together into one long image. You can capture some really cool stuff. Even when there's movement, it can be tricky. It's hit or miss when there's a lot of people moving around you, because you can imagine you're actually capturing a bunch of separate photos and you're trying to merge them together. It can make some very funny photos of people trying to dance and things with elongated heads and arms and things of that nature. But if you blur it out, or maybe you use some post-editing skills, you can make that look like a whole bunch of people having a great time. So that's kind of neat. All right, let's go ahead and move back to just regular photo so we can talk about some of the things you're going to want to pay attention to as well. So like I said, on many different smartphones, you probably have multiple lens types. And those lens types allow you to capture the different kind of images. So if you're in really close to the stage and you want to capture kind of this epic shot that just looks like the stage is towering, it just looks alive, it looks amazing, you might want to use the ultra wide. So on an iPhone, a 12, a 13, even 11, we have 3 lenses. I know on the latest Android devices you have multiple lenses as well, and there's various ways you can switch between those. I'm sure you Android users know how to get to your ultra wide or your wide angle lenses. On an iPhone, we've got 3 little dots here. 0.5 is going to be the widest angle lens, and I'm just going to shoot it your way if you don't mind. You can kind of see what I'm talking about as far as ultra wide. Then we have the regular wide angle lens, and then we have a telephoto. Now, the closer you are with the camera lens, in other words, when I use the telephoto, the more stable you're going to need to be. And that can be very tricky, right? Especially if you're in a crowd and you're trying to get those shots. So rotate the camera, put both fingers on it, try to bring in your elbows to your body a little bit, and maybe in some cases lean down on one knee to kind of stable yourself, and you might be able to get some better shots that way. Okay?
The key to that is think about holding your camera stable. You got a
And
situation, put that in your mind, hold it stable, and then those other tricks help. But if you don't think it's stabilized, then everything else is a trick you don't think of.
right, think about it. Always when you go to take a photo, think about what you're taking. Now, if you're taking these photos in the nighttime and there's not much light, you're going to have to be a lot more stable. And of course, there's tripods and other things you can get that'll help you with that. Maybe you see an opportunity of a table or a speaker or something near you where you can rest your smartphone and maybe get a better shot that way. But you are going to have to be extra stable if it's an evening shot. So definitely keep that in mind. All right, so we talked about lenses. Another thing on an iPhone, in addition to tapping any one of 3 of those lenses and switching between them, I can just hold. And when I hold, I'm going to get a little dial, and I can just move my finger left or right, and you can see how I'm getting a wider range. I'm zooming in and out. Now, once I go past the 2.5 on my iPhone, I'm using something called a digital zoom. Me personally, I never use digital zoom. Even if I want to get that signage clearer or I want to get that artist on stage clearer, I don't use digital zoom. And here's why. Digital zoom is going to basically figure out or guesstimate all the little pixels that are needed to fill in the space to make it look like you're closer. And it's not always ideal because it can make the image a bit more blurry. So what I'll do is I'll just bump it up to the top lens, whatever I can get, in my case the 2.5 lens. I'll capture my photo that way. And let's see, I don't really want to bother taking photos of people here. We got something, I got a sign way back there behind everybody. I'm trying to get you guys out of the shot. I'll just take my picture with the lens that'll get me the closest, because that way it's a regular camera lens zoom, it's not a digital zoom. And then what I'll do is I'll go into that photograph and I'll just zoom in on it, and then I'll crop it. So just in this case, I could just tap it, go into edit, zoom in, crop it. Probably should have done that first. Boom, boom, boom. And in my opinion, that's going to get you a better quality shot because you're using the hardware of your device to get closer versus using the software. Okay? You will end up with a smaller image size at the end of the day, which may not be ideal for printing, but in most cases it's going to be fine for sharing on social media, posting to your websites, your blogs, wherever you want to use this photograph. So that would be my suggestion as far as the lenses go. All right, moving from there, let's talk about the exposure. So whenever I move my camera around, and most likely the same on the Android devices, in this case you're seeing some yellow little rectangles appearing over some of your faces. That's because on the iPhone there's face recognition, so it's trying to get all those faces in sharp. But maybe you're not worried about faces, you're just worried about equipment. You're worried about what does the stage look like? What's that sign look like? How can I make that sign as clear as possible? Well, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use your finger, you're going to tap on whatever it is you want to have in focus. So I'm going to use that sign way back there again. And if I tap on it, you'll see that box moves to that area. Now, as soon as I start to move around, it's going to start focusing in other areas as well. So I want to lock it. And on an iPhone, and I'm going to use this sign, it's a little closer here, this cool zone. As soon as I leave my finger on it for a few seconds, you'll see that yellow box pulsates. It kind of went boom, boom. Now it is locked, and I know it's locked because at the very top it says AEAF lock. I've locked the exposure, that's AE, and I've locked the focus, that's AF. So it's no longer automatically doing those things. And it'll stay like that no matter where I turn my camera until I tap again. And Android devices have a similar setting as well. So once I lock it using my iPhone and I get that pulsation, I know it's locked because of that yellow bar on the top, I can put my finger on the screen and I can pull downwards and you'll see a little sun. And that little sun, as it moves further down, it's going to get darker. As it moves further up, it's going to get brighter. Now, this is going to become really useful when you are shooting a stage at night and you're trying to capture all the cool lighting and you're trying to capture the artist on the stage. You are going to always want to focus in on what's important. Put your finger on that subject, whatever it is. Maybe it's the signage, maybe it's the lighting array, maybe it's the speakers, maybe it's the performers. You're going to want to put your finger on that and you're going to lock it. And then once you lock it, I recommend you drag it down a little bit. You underexpose. So I like to make my images a little darker, and then that way I'm going to be able to see a lot more detail in the lights, a lot more detail on the stage and the speakers and things of that nature. And if I need to make it brighter, I can always do that in post when I go to edit it. But if I capture the image and it's too bright and those lights are blown out, and instead of seeing an array of lights, I just see a big block of color, I can't get that back. I can't go in and edit and go, okay, let me make that better. So I definitely recommend that if you're shooting in the evening time, lock in on what's important. On the iPhone, that means putting your finger there, waiting till it locks, and then just drag down with your finger. And you can see even here, we're in this tint, and if I just move around, you can see it's pretty bright outside. There's not a lot of detail outside. If I want to capture something outside while I'm in this tint, I'm going to focus on something that's bright, and then I'm going to pull down. And now you can see I'm getting a lot more detail out there in the area where all these stages are set up. Whereas obviously in here, it's underexposed, it's much darker. So something I definitely recommend you do when you're shooting at night. I do it almost any time. And this is a little off topic. If you are somebody who shoots sunsets or you're visiting here, and of course, there's a lot of sunset opportunity or sunrise more here on the East Coast. I'm from West Coast Florida originally, so I get both. You want to capture an amazing sunset on your next vacation or wherever you are, always, always, always put your finger on the sun, lock it, and drag down a little bit. You're going to get the best sunset, sunrise photos with your iPhone or your Android phones that way. All right, let's see. Talking about capturing the shot. And we talked about different lens types. We talked about the different modes on the iPhone. We talked about how we're going to change the focus and the exposure. Let's talk about flash. Who here is a big fan of flash? Good. I hate flash. I don't think I ever used the flash. In fact, I think one phone, iPhone 10 or something I had way back, I had never used the flash. And when I finally decided I wanted to use it, it was like, okay, I'm going to give you problems. I had to reset the phone or something because I hadn't used flash in so long. Flash on an iPhone's right up here in the top left corner. It's a little lightning bolt, circle around it. If you tap on it, you're going to get different options to change it. You can have it on auto, on or off. When you're at a concert or you're at some sort of fun venue and you go to take that picture and the flash goes off, not only does it blow for the people around you going, hey, what's going on? I'm enjoying the show. But you're going to get the backs of people's heads and their backs all bright, and the stage is going to be, off somewhere else. And it's not going to look great. What's going to look great is the stage is the main light. And the stage is going to be the main light if you keep that flash off and you focus in on those things. So definitely forget about flash would be my advice. Now, of course, if you're capturing somebody in close and you need some filler light, I usually carry a little cube light. I have a little teeny light in my mini pack here that I'll share with you guys a little later. I'd rather use a fill light and just kind of hold it off here and then take my picture. So I get the light from the side of whatever I'm shooting or whoever I'm shooting, as opposed to straight on and ghostly looking and bright. So that would be my suggestion for flash. Moving across, I did mention RAW earlier. Raise your hand if you know what a RAW photo is, or you even care about it. Okay, so RAW photos are very, very large files. So I do not recommend shooting RAW photos all of the time. But if you are like, really, this is the moment, I gotta capture this perfect shot, you might want to go ahead and turn on an option for RAW in your devices. On the iPhone, we saw we could turn that on in the settings, but once we turn it on in the settings, we will have the option within the camera to quickly toggle it on or off. So what is it? Well, RAW is just a way to gather the absolute most information into the photograph. All of the different tones, all of the different colors are captured because the image is not compressed. When you're using a smartphone or any little small compact camera, pretty much always, and even the DSLR cameras, you're going to be capturing a JPEG image. You can capture other formats like TIFF, but generally it's going to be a JPEG, and the reason for that is it can be compressed. So little bits of information are removed, so you get a good photo, pretty good photo, but it's a lot smaller, so you can store more of it on your phone or more of it on your camera card. Once you put it on RAW, that image bumps up like by 4 or 5. So it's going to use way more memory. The advantage, though, is it's not compressed. When I go to edit it, I have a lot more options for editing that RAW photograph. Now, not all apps can edit a RAW photo. Your built-in camera app or photo app is going to be able to do that, most likely, if you can capture RAW. But some other third-party applications won't know what to do with it. If you use Photoshop or Lightroom or anything like that, you know that you can use RAW there, and you are going to have the most information to work with. Now, when you first look at that photo you've taken in RAW, it's not going to look that good. And that's because when you look at it at first, it's typically very flat and somewhat gray. But when you open it up into these different applications, that's when you can really tweak it, bring out certain colors that you want to highlight. Maybe you want to highlight the oranges and the blues. And that's where RAW photo comes in handy. So if you're not capturing a photo of a stage, maybe you're at the Grand Canyon, maybe you're in Kauai, or you're somewhere just amazing and you want to capture some amazing landscape photo, that would definitely be an opportunity for RAW. Okay, going back. Let's talk about the rule of thirds. So, I'm not sure how well you can see it. I'll kind of put my hand here so you can see, or move to the ground. Everyone see those grid lines on my camera? Okay. So that is the grid that we turned on earlier in settings, and that is something called the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is not a smartphone thing, an iPhone thing. It is something that's been around for a very, very long time. And it's just a way to help you compose your photograph. So when you take a photograph, a lot of times people just immediately put the subject in the dead center. But you can get some really interesting photos by using these grid lines to compose your shot. So in the case of these lines, there's two horizontal, two vertical. So if I have the horizon, I can see the horizon, the ground in any way. I typically want to capture that horizon line on either the upper or the lower. Well, how do we know which one? Well, if there's more interesting things above the horizon, like the sky, the stage, so on and so forth, we're going to use that bottom line and we're going to shoot more upwards to capture our shot. But if there's more interesting things in the foreground, then we're going to use that upper line. And we're just going to kind of look for something on the horizon. A little hard to see a horizon here because we got a room full of, a tent full of people and a bunch of different things out here. But, you know, if we were outside or when we do go, over here, you know, you could certainly look out into the ocean, right? And you know the ocean meets the sky, that's our natural horizon. That's where you would want to line up one of those horizontal lines. The vertical lines is where it gets more interesting because that's where you want to line up the subject or maybe the main thing. So if you're maybe further back in a venue and you're capturing the stage, you know, you don't want to necessarily just fill up the whole shot with the stage. You might already have some of those shots, but now you're further back and, you know, some of the really cool shots are going to be with the stage off to one side, and then you see, you know, all the people having a great time and all the lights shining from the stage and lighting up all those people in that environment. I mean, I've been to hundreds of concerts, and, you know, my favorite photos are those where you see the stage and you see the light emitting from the stage and it's lighting up everybody and you can just tell everybody's having a great time. And so capturing all of that is really nice. So I would urge you to line up your subjects with one of those vertical lines, which is going to push it off over to the left or the right. So that's the rule of thirds. Of course, you can use the rule of thirds for anything. I always have it on. And in addition to helping me compose my image and decide where things are going to be, it also lets me have a good idea of how straight I'm holding my camera. Now, of course, if you're off a little bit, no big deal. We just take that photo and edit it and we just tweak it a little bit and we straighten it right out, right? So that's the rule of thirds. That pretty much covers everything for taking photos. Now we're going to move on to editing those photos and organizing those photos. So Mike mentioned earlier, you know, maybe you're capturing so many photos that you're not sure where those photos are or how best to organize them or what to do with them. First of all, don't worry about taking too many photos. You're not paying for film. It's not the old days. You don't have to take it somewhere to get developed and fork out more money. You can take as many photos as you want and you can get rid of them later. So I always say, take more and more and more photos. Take as many as you need. Later you go back and you make what photographers call the selects. And you pick out the best ones. So at the risk of exposing my personal life a little bit, I'm going to bring open some photos here. And I did take a few of the stage shots previously. There's some other stuff I have on here, personal stuff. But at the bottom here, I have my photos. And by the way, I'm sure you iPhone people know, you can get to the camera app or get to the Photos app directly from the camera, or you can go to the Photos application right here. Once you open it up, it's organized by library, for you, albums, and search. So we're just going to focus on library. So if you're following along with me, tapping on that's going to let you see all your photos. You can pinch and zoom to see more, see less. You can also organize them by years, months, days. So if these aren't fresh photos or photos you just took, you're looking for something you took, you know, last fall or the spring before that, That's where you can bump out to years and start looking through all your years photos, your months photos, your days, and then eventually get to all of them. That's a quick way to find what you're looking for. Of course, on an iPhone, you can use the search over on the bottom right. One of the great things about the newer iPhones or with the newer operating system, there's artificial intelligence built into your device. So not only is it registering the date and time you took that picture, it's looking at all your photos going, you know, what's in that photo? You have a dog, you have a lake, you have a mountain, you have a beach. So you can actually search for things just like that. You can name people. That helps you in finding them. You can look for places. Maybe you aren't sure when you took the picture, but you remember where you took the picture. So you can go to places, look for your photos that way, and the different categories. But I'm going to bump back over to the library. And up in the top right, we have the word select. So the first thing I would do if I went on a job to shoot anything is go ahead and select all those photos. On an iPhone, you can just swipe and go all the way down. I'll include this one. Once I have selected them all, they're checked, they're ready to go. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have an arrow, or we have a box rectangle with an arrow pointing up. On every Apple device, that means share. I want to share it somewhere. I want to move it from where it is now. So if I do that, it's going to bring up all sorts of people I can share with, devices out there I can share with. I can text it, email it, add it to notes. But down below, we have add to album. And that's going to just group all those photos. Now, I get asked a lot, if I create an album, can I now delete it from the library? No. When you create an album on an iPhone, it's not duplicating your photos and moving them somewhere else. All it really is doing is creating a filter so you just see those photos. When you go to your library, you're going to still see those photos and everything else. But if you delete it from the library, it's going to delete it from the album. So I'm going to create my album. I'm sorry? If you delete it from the album, it's just going to remove it from that group. You're still going to have it in your library. There are ways on your iPhone that you'll see where it will tell you, or it'll ask you rather, do you want to delete from album or do you want to delete from library? And that's where you really know where you're deleting. So I've gone ahead and I've named my album. And I can go over to the album section, which is the third icon on the bottom. And here we have my albums right on top. And we have all the stage shots. And now it's really just a matter of going through and deciding which ones do I want to keep. Now, another way you could do this is just go through that set of photos and tap on the little heart. And that's going to move them over to favorites. But if you're using your smartphone for your personal life and your business life, you may want to create an album and do it a different way. A lot of times I'll go ahead and create one album, and then I'll duplicate it, make another album, and then the second album are the selects. So for instance, I just have this stage album right now. I could grab everything again and make another album. This time, go ahead and make it stage selects. So I've got two albums. Right now they're identical. One has everything I shot. The other one I'm going to go through and I'm going to start deleting photos that I don't think meet the criteria. They're not the ones that I think are the best ones. So that's simple enough to do. Of course, on an iPhone, I can just go and select this way and then hit the garbage can. More than likely, you will be looking at these images larger, either on the device itself. Maybe you even have an iPad or a tablet with you where they'll sync. Every time I take a picture here, I could walk over to my iPad if I'm on Wi-Fi or I'm connected to the internet, and it's going to sync. That's actually the best way for somebody like me. If I'm hired to take photos, instead of me trying to edit and look at everything right here, Obviously, it's going to be a lot better for me to look on a 13-inch screen and edit everything that way. So if you do have a larger screen available to you, I definitely recommend you use that. You can even buy little hoodies that will allow you to do some better editing if it's bright outside. So different things you might want to consider. But if you're looking at the image large and you're going through deciding what's a keeper and what's not a keeper, same thing. You can't see it on the screen here, but on your devices, you're going to see a little garbage can, and you just hit that garbage can. And this is the case on an iPhone where it's going to ask you, do you want to remove it from the album, or you just want to get rid of it completely from your library? So you can do either. I just remove from album until I'm done with my project, because you never know when you might need to go back and grab some other image. When I'm completely done with my project, I've collected my payment, I'm moving on to something different, that's when I'll go ahead and I'll just get rid of, you know, what I don't need anymore, or archive it in some way. So that's how that works. So with that said, that's organizing. As far as editing goes, let's go right back there. On an iPhone, the top corner, you're going to see a word edit. And in edit, we have many different options. I'll go through a few of them, but let's just talk about this magic wand real quick. The very first thing says auto. It's a little magic wand. Honestly, even though I know how to use all the different settings, I recommend just tapping that wand right out of the gate. Because what that's going to do is it's going to use the artificial intelligence on your device. It's going to analyze that photo. It's going to decide, does this photo need to be a little lighter? Should we add a little more contrast? Maybe we should bump up the colors a little bit. Maybe the temperature's a little off, so we should change the temperature because of when the photo was taken. And on the iPhone, as I scroll across on these circles, you'll see each one of them has a little line either moving towards the positive, clockwise in yellow, or counterclockwise in white. And if I scroll across each one has, almost every one of them, not the ones towards the end, but a lot of them have already been tweaked. And so what that is it's the artificial intelligence on the device that decided, hey, based on this photo, based on the lighting, these are the adjustments me, the artificial intelligence, thinks is best. And honestly, it does a great job. Now, it doesn't do a perfect job. Sometimes I want to go back in and tweak it more. As you know, I've been taking photos forever. I'm a Photoshop 1.0 user all the way to whatever we're on now, 18, 19, 20 something, lost track. So I know how to use all those settings. I understand what they mean. But in all the years that I've been teaching and using smartphones, I've found that, you know, just starting with auto is great because it's already saving me a whole bunch of time. Now I can go back and mess with the other settings. And we'll talk about those. So as I go across, we have exposure. That's if your image is too dark or too bright. You can bring it up or down. I rarely touch that, honestly. Moving across, brilliance. That's kind of the new kid on the block. It's a combination of different things. It kind of is a little bit of brightness and a little bit of exposure, a little bit of contrast. It definitely makes images look great on an iPhone, and you'll see in this case the auto bumped up already. But the ones that are key in any kind of photography, whether you're using a DSLR and then using Photoshop or some other editing app like Lightroom, is shadows and highlights. Shadows and highlights. These are going to be really game changers when you start playing around with your image. So what are they? Well, first of all, I'm going to focus on shadows. Now, this image, the shadows, the lighting, and everything is pretty good already, honestly. But if you're looking at a photograph and you have areas that are just too dark, you can't make out the detail in those areas. Of course, a lot of the equipment on these stages is black. So if you're trying to capture some of the nuances of the speakers or the nuances of the lighting or any of that sort of thing, it might be too dark. Or you've taken that photo at night and it's during a jamming show and the lights are blaring, and those look great because you put your finger on them and you underexpose, but now there's some areas where you want to get some detail that they're a little too dark. So what shadows allows you to do is lighten the dark areas of your photo only. So whereas something like brightness or exposure is going to raise the lightness up all together, or the darkness all together at the same time, highlights and shadows only focus on either the darks or the lights. So for instance, in this one, there's sort of some dark dressing down here and the speakers, and maybe I can't make out the speakers from that backdrop, and I want to make it out a little better. So I could go to my shadows and just start bringing them up. Now I'm going to exaggerate this, accentuate it, so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see that it's the dark area of my photo that's getting brighter, right? And on an iPhone, one of the best things you can do, and I'm pretty sure you can do this on Android as well, as you're editing and you're making all those changes, if you want to see where you started and where you are now, just put your finger on the image for a moment, before, after, before, after, before, after. So as I'm editing, I'm always looking at both. I'm going, okay, what did it look like? What's it look like now? And that gives me a better idea. So you can see the difference. Not only the auto adjustments have made, but that shadows area is made, right? And then the opposite of that, of course, is going to be highlights. This is when the areas where there's light in your photo are blown out. And the word blown out, photographers use it for when they're shooting clouds, and instead of seeing all the nuances of the clouds, it's just white. I don't see the details. Or maybe in the case of shooting a stage, you know, the light array is just blown out. I can't really discern some of the different streaks and lights and things. So what I can do is use this setting, highlights, to bring in more detail. So in this case, I go in the opposite direction. I want to make those bright areas less bright. So I'm going to exaggerate it. And you can see what it's doing to my sky. And you can see, I'm able to see the details of those palm trees and things that are shadows on the back of the stage. So that's what I would recommend you focus on, if you focus on anything, are the highlights and the shadows. And then moving over, let me get a question over here real quick. Right, so I'm just doing some basic editing within the Photos application on an iPhone. Of course, you can install other applications like Lightroom or Darkroom. So in the basic editing features on the iPhone, you can't isolate the areas where you want to edit. That's a good question. But there are many third-party applications. If you want to take it to that level, you can definitely do that, where you can mask out areas and say, I only want to edit this area. Lightroom's good for that. Darkroom's good for that. I can show you some other applications later if you come up to me. I'm sorry? Pages? Pages is... Yeah, I wouldn't use that to edit a photograph, but there are some editing features in the Pages application as well. Yeah. Okay, cool. Of course, in other third-party applications like Lightroom, once you start editing one or two photos, you might start to see you're basically applying the same edits over and over. And you can do something called batch editing. And you can basically copy this recipe of settings and then paste it to all these other images all in one big swoop, and then go in and fine tune as well. So that's another option. Lastly, or two last things I want to talk about. A lot of people ask me about the difference between saturation and vibrance. They both seem like they're doing the same thing, bumping up the color or removing the color. The big difference is if you have a person in your shot, especially somebody in the foreground, somebody up close, you're going to want to use vibrance. So basically, vibrance is saturation minus skin tones. So it's going to make the flowers and the palm tree and the scene behind the individual look amazing, or around them. Maybe their shirts and different things that they're wearing. That's going to look great. You're going to bump up that color without making them look like they were out in the sun all day, you know? So that's the difference between vibrance and saturation. It's basically bringing up the color, but vibrance avoids the skin tones. And then all the way at the very end, I love it, Vignette. Vignette just adds either a dark or a lighter tone around the corners or the borders of your photograph. And I always go for dark. I don't really make it brighter around the edges. What does that do? It draws the viewer's eye into the photograph. You're kind of giving a little bit of tunnel vision, right? I'm going to accentuate it, and you can see up here it's, you know, a lot darker. So here's sort of a before and after. I have really exaggerated my edits. I would not do it this way normally, but based on what I can see on the TV, and I know from out there, looking at a TV in a bright area, sometimes you can't really see the details that well. So I am exaggerating these things. I would not go that far in your photos because you don't want your photos to look fake or look too unworldly sometimes, right? Because the other part of that is, or the flip side of that is, sometimes you do want to make them look overly saturated or overly contrast or overly interesting because that's the look you're going for, right? That's the look that you've established for your website or your brand or something like that. All right. From there, of course, we have different filters we can apply that make colors more vivid, more cool, more warm. The difference between cool and warm is going to add more yellows and oranges and reds to your image, make it look more cozy. That's nice. And then there's cool, which is going to make it look more blue, more purple. It depends on your shot, which one you want to use or what kind of look you're going for. But whichever way you end up going, warm or cool, with your set of photos, I recommend you stick with that throughout the series so that they all look like a cohesive bunch when you put them together on a website or social media or you print them out. And then crop. This is probably where I should have started, to be honest with you. Cropping can do wonders. You know, you can be out there capturing a bunch of shots. I always look through every one of my shots, and I probably crop 90% of them because, you know, I want to go in and maybe I wasn't in the right position when I took that shot because somebody was in my way or there was something around me that I couldn't get around. And so I'll capture the shot however I need to capture it, and then you go into the crop tool, and on the iPhone you can just drag these borders any way you want. If you want to isolate sort of what the orientation of this is, there is a little box up here in the corner. A lot of people don't recognize that little box. Once you start cropping on an iPhone, if you do tap that, you'll see it has all the different ratios presented down at the bottom. So I can leave this as freeform, which means I can crop it any shape, size, orientation I want, but more than likely you're going to want a perfect square. You're going to want maybe 9 by 16. Most likely you want 16 by 9. The ratio 16 by 9 is a widescreen. That's 16 by 9 right there. So if you're going to be showing all your photos on a smart TV, 16 by 9 is a great crop because it's going to crop it perfectly to fit in. It depends which social media. So, of course, Instagram, I go with square all the time on Instagram because that's the first thing people see. If you upload a photo that's too wide or too tall, then there are areas where Instagram will do the crop for you, or you say, I don't want the crop, and then you have a border of some kind, which I don't like, because then as I'm looking through the images on Instagram, they're not all consistent. So I go with square with Instagram. Facebook, it's a lot more flexible on Facebook and other websites. If you want to know the best sizes, pixel sizes or ratios for different social media, all you got to do is search for that in Google or whatever your favorite search engine is. You will see there are tons of websites for graphic designers or just anybody that wants to understand what are the ratios for that banner across my Facebook page. What's the perfect ratio for my avatar or for telling a story on Instagram? Just do a search for social media photo ratios or social media photo sizes. Believe me, you're going to come across tons of websites that explain it very, very well. You can even download PDF documents and keep those on your devices, and those are going to definitely tell you that information. All right, that's pretty much with all the settings. Does anybody have questions about any of that real quick? Okay, give me 1 second, Mike.
I just wanted to get the session so we can start.
Get going on to take a photo. Let me answer these quick questions, then we'll head out. And while we're out there, I can maybe answer some of your other questions.
Thank you for this session. A lot of good information. So, on the capture side, I can capture square 4:3:16:9. What's the sensor ratio? Am I getting more information, or is it just scaling or cropping out to go when I hit 16:9 versus 4:3?
That's a good question. It's my understanding is it's just cropping it out. So
4:3 is the sensor.
right.
Okay.
Let me think. You're asking a little more technical question than we normally go when I'm
Just don't
teaching a
wanna
session.
throw away pixels that I may need later. That's kinda
Right.
what I'm
Well,
thinking.
here's the great thing about an iPhone, and I'm sure even on the Android devices, non-destructive editing. So no matter what you do with your images, it's non-destructive, meaning later on you can revert it right back to the original photograph. So all the changes we made to this photograph, color, cropping, all that stuff, at any point, maybe it's another hour, maybe it's a week, a year, a couple years, I can go back, bring up that image, hit revert, it's going to go right back. So you're never going to lose anything. And if you want to get multiple ratios or multiple looks for one photograph on an iPhone, all you need to do for that is get out of the photo editing, get rid of that, and use that share button that's in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you scroll upwards, you're going to see duplicate. And just duplicate that image as many times as you want, so you can have multiple crops, multiple color looks, all that. But at any time, you can go back. Most all smartphones use non-destructive editing, so it's not going to be in stone. Now, if you have other little questions that you want to ask me, I can definitely answer those when we're out here. If you have a question you think is going to benefit the group, I'll get that answered here real quick.
How do you make me look thinner and
I had to sign a form. I can't answer questions like that.
and I have one other question. So in the old iPhoto app, you could get the metadata really easily.
Ooh, ask me that when we get out there.
Okay.
That's a longer answer.
Are we able to use a watermark in this app, the Apple app? Or do
No.
we need to use something like Lightroom or Photoshop for that?
So you can do something where you can mark up the photo, and in markup you could type something out like copyright blah blah blah, stick it in the bottom corner in the Photos app, in the editing, you can do that. But if you want something more stylized, more customized, you're going to want a third-party app. All right, so with that said, we're low on time. If you would like to come, and I definitely recommend you do come with us, we're going to pop around to a few different stages. I'm going to talk about thinking about the lighting, thinking about your positioning, thinking about your different lenses. give you some tips, and I'll try to answer a few questions while we're out there. Does that sound good, Mike?
Sounds good.
What time you want to have people back here?
We have about 20 minutes to do that. We're already booked.
All right, got it. So let's